All right, here we go. Team previews continue. Houston Texans like this team a lot. Watson was Superman last year, before, right when he got hurt. 4-12 straight up last year. They lost 9 of their final 10 games after Watson got hurt. Carved up the Patriots, should have won on the road. Carved up the Seahawks, should have won on the road. O'Brien was the fault to blame for a couple of those games. 7-9 ATS and 9-7 to the under. They're still, well, I mean, what stats you want to go with? I mean, they were great when Watson was in there, and then once Savage came in, forget about it. They were terrible.
And this is exactly why the mainstream stats and statistical analysis for the NFL and for any sport has to be taken with a grain of salt. It has to be. The Houston Texans with Deshaun Watson were Super Bowl contenders. The Houston Texans, once Watson got hurt, and it was not a good QB situation without him, and J.J. Watt got hurt, and Merciless got hurt, and the injury was an injury-riddled mess, and they got 1-9 their last 10 games. They were a disaster. They were a terrible team. You look at the stats at the end of it, you say, oh, wow, their stats weren't good, so therefore they're not that good. I mean, you can't look at last year's stats for Houston to get anything from it. Nonetheless, I'll give you some. 5.0 yards per play on offense, that's below average. 5.7 yards per play on defense. That's tied for 31st in the NFL, near the bottom. Only 16 takeaways. That was number 28 in the NFL. 28 giveaways. That was number 27 in the NFL. The minus 12 turnover margin, number 28. And, of course, when you look at the teams behind them in turnover margin, Oakland, Miami, Denver, Cleveland, a combined 17 and 51 straight up last year. All 6 and 10 or worse. So the teams that Houston turned the ball over with were all complete disasters. The Texans certainly fell into that group. But when you look at the offseason, you talk about Watt coming back. You talk about Watson coming back. You talk about Bill O'Brien still being in the fold. So they're not changing schemes. The core group is there, and the injured players are returning. In theory, that should bode well for Houston looking at the 2018 campaign.
Yeah, they didn't do much. They didn't have to do much because you get Watson and Watt back, and they could be the team to beat in that division, as Watson was so good. I don't know what the hell O'Brien was looking at camp. Hopkins, too, that he went to bat for Savage. You could see after one half of preseason football who the better quarterback was, and Savage lasted for a half before they brought in Hopkins. Remember, they also ran out the Titans and put up 50 on them at home as well. They brought in Honey Badger, and they also, Will Fuller got hurt, too. He was banged up. Everyone was hurt for that team. But you have Hopkins, you have Fuller, you bring in Honey Badger, Coates as well to throw to. So Watson has weapons, and you reload on defense.
Yeah, no question. This team, when it comes to receiving weapons, I'll take this group. Hopkins on the one side, Fuller on the other, and Coates in the slot. That's a nice trio to go with Deshaun Watson. You look at the defensive side, you're absolutely right. J.D. Clowney's a name we haven't talked about, and Whitney Merciless and J.J. Watt. Plenty of star power. Secondary's loaded. You bring in the Honey Badger from Arizona. I'm with you. But there are 2 key personnel groups, one of which got addressed, one hasn't. They did put a lot of effort into their offensive line. That being said, this offensive line could have as many as 4 new starters. You bring in Chantrell Henderson. You bring in Sieno Calamete. You bring in Zach Fulton. You draft in the 3rd round Martin Rankin from Mississippi State. All 4 of those guys could be in the starting lineup on opening day. That's a concern for me, this offensive line. And when you throw in the fact that you look at this running back core, I'm not a running back guy. I believe most running backs are replaceable. But this might be the weakest running back core in the NFL. I'm not even sure if they can block. So you have an offensive line with question marks. You have a mobile quarterback with an injury history. And you have a running back that isn't likely to take a whole lot of pressure off the team. That's my biggest concern about the Texans going into the 2018 campaign. Can they protect Watson? Can they grind out yards on the ground? If they can't, this year might look a little bit more like last year than bettors would hope and Texans fans would hope. If they can't, and that is an if because the free agents they added, they look pretty good on paper. But no question, it's that offensive line going into the season has to be viewed as a major question mark.
Tough start at New England and at Tennessee to start the season. Then it's 3 out of 4 at home. And there's also they have 3 in a row at home with a Monday night game against Tennessee, Cleveland at home, and then the Colts at home. So they can make some hay if they can maybe get a split to start. Giants at home, at Indy, Dallas, Buffalo at home. Some winnable games there. Miami at Denver before the bye week. What are your thoughts on the schedule?
Yeah, and you look post by, at Washington, Tennessee at home, Cleveland at home, Indy at home, at the Jets. They can make up some ground in that stretch right there. They could be favored in all 5 of those ball games in theory. And, again, it's a team that didn't and couldn't do much in the draft to add players. They didn't have a first rounder. They didn't have a second rounder. So when you talk about going, with the Watson deal and the after effects of that, the AFC South does face AFC East and NFC East. So there's not a ton of travel for the Texans this year, although, they will be traveling back and forth east. They're not going to be all over the country. Their 2 extra games, not too bad. Denver at home and then at Cleveland. It's not a bad schedule for Houston. It's a schedule that we look at and say, yeah, maybe this team's got a little bit of potential. Although, as you mentioned, the opener, fairly tough. Not going to be easy to go into New England and take on the defending AFC champs on the opening. Oh, that's not even Sunday night game on the opening day of the season. Like the show? Help us keep the lights on. Please make sure to comment, share, and subscribe to all the Sportsbook Review videos. Thanks so much. Best of luck. Enjoy the game.